Hey everyone, on this episode of SheRocks College Live, we're going to be talking about how to know if you are self-sabotaging your success as a student without even knowing it. I'm going to walk you through the simple and practical ways that you can get out of your own way and achieve anything that you want. Welcome back to SheRocks College Live. Welcome back, everyone. I am your host, Clarissa, and you are watching SheRocks College Live, a live show that happens here on YouTube where I help college women like you step into their brilliance, get out of their own way, and stop self-sabotaging. So if that sounds like you, this show is going to be specifically for you because I'm going to be talking tonight about exactly how we get in our own way. We create limitations and barriers to us achieving our success as college women. And often we do them in very sneaky little ways that we aren't conscious of. Now, there are going to be some self-sabotaging behaviors that I'm going to talk about tonight that you're going to clearly know that those are self-sabotaging behaviors, but I'm also going to share with you a few that might be sneaking in and that you might not be aware of. I'm definitely going to go in depth with this episode. I'm going to really make sure that I explain the deep understanding and my unique perspective to getting in your own way and to the topic of self-sabotage, which sometimes people call a tendency to be a perfectionist, but really it's all the same energy, it's all the same vibe. We're doing the same damage to ourselves, which is really holding ourselves back and taking away our own personal power. And so I'm going to dive right into the very first way that we self-sabotage, and that's through having an all or nothing mentality. Now, we live in a duality, right? There's good to bad, high to low, right or wrong. That's the construct, the social construct that we live in right now. And so it is very natural for us to have this all or nothing perspective where we're either really amazing or crappy. Our grades are super high or they suck. We are consistent with our study routine or we completely fell off the bandwagon. And the reason why this type of mentality is a self-sabotaging mentality is because, number one, it assumes that there's only one way to achieve success, and that's being all in all of the time and being perfect. It also assumes that there is no room to become, that there is no prize in the not yet, that there is no value in allowing yourself to go through the process of becoming better, the process of improvement. And the reason why this is a self-sabotaging behavior is because of the self-pity cycle that it puts you in and holds you back. Because when you are doing really well, you obviously think really highly of yourself, and it kind of puts you on this pedestal that you want to try to maintain, and you do everything in your power to try to maintain that image. But what happens when you are not perfect with it and you fall off of the bandwagon is that you then go into this self-pity cycle where, why does this always happen to me? Why is it that I can't ever stick to something? Why is it that nothing ever works in my favor? Why is it that I'm the one that has to work really hard for things? Why doesn't anything come easy to me? And then you beat yourself up for having those thoughts. You feel bad for having those thoughts, and you're constantly oscillating between those two dualities. I'm either really amazing and doing really well and perfectly at this thing, or I'm not doing it well at all. And in reality, nothing ever works that way. Everyone has moments where they are not consistent with the actions that they're taking in their life. And it doesn't take away from who they are. It doesn't take away from their worth. It doesn't take away from their value. But when you start attaching meaning to being in the process of becoming, that's when we start getting into trouble. So the second way that you unknowingly self-sabotage is through people pleasing. So people pleasing is really when we try to control other people's opinion of us. It's where we are trying to protect our own emotions. It's where we are trying to protect ourselves from being in an uncomfortable space where we're experiencing emotions that we want to avoid, right? Because when you say yes to people, when you set goals, make decisions based off of what other people want for you, even though it goes against everything that you want for yourself, what you're really doing in that is you are making that other person feel comfortable, right? So you're trying to protect their emotional state. And in the process of trying to protect their emotional state, you're harming your emotional state, because now you're having to deal with all of this dissonance because you're going against the very thing that you want internally, that your soul is yearning for. And so what it does is it actually harms you, and you trying to protect your image, and that other person's opinion of you. The third way that we self-sabotage is through unconsciously fearing that we're going to lose someone's love if we don't maintain a certain image. Now, usually this fear of losing someone's love is the fear of losing someone particular. Oftentimes it's our parents. Oftentimes it's someone very close to us. It might be a partner, a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a brother, a sister. But typically it is your parents. And so through you fearing losing that person's love, you begin to act out of character. You do things that go against the very things it is that you want for yourself. You chase goals that you don't value. You chase things that you don't value. You act in a way that it isn't in accordance with who you really want to be. And again, you are protecting that other person's emotional state by not making them uncomfortable. But in the process of you protecting that other person's emotional state, what you are doing is harming your own emotional state, and you're causing a lot of turmoil internally for yourself. And what that does is it takes away a lot of your energy to do the things it is that you want to do, to really show up for yourself, because you're constantly having to manage these emotions and deal with them, and you're drained from it. The fourth way, and this is a really common one that you will probably really resonate with, is procrastination. Procrastination, at its very core, is really all about the fear of wasting effort. It's the fear of rejection. It's the fear of failure. Oftentimes, when people are procrastinating, the reason why they're procrastinating is because they're trying to avoid a negative emotion that the act that they're procrastinating on brings up. So I'm going to give the example of reading an assignment and taking notes so that you can prepare for an exam. Often students avoid doing that because that process brings up boredom, something that they don't want to experience. Oftentimes, the process of reading the textbook and taking notes brings up in them a feeling of confusion. They feel like they don't know the information. Oftentimes, it brings up this anxiety around, am I writing down the right information? And so students will often procrastinate in order to avoid those negative emotions. And in the process of them avoiding those negative emotions, avoiding rejection, avoiding having to waste effort because they fear that even if they sit down to do the reading, they might not pull out the right information and then fail the exam, they cause the very thing that they were afraid of in the first place, because then they're not as prepared as they could have been for the exam. And procrastination doesn't always look like watching Netflix. Sometimes we can procrastinate in ways that make us feel like we're being really productive. So you might find students who will rewrite their notes over and over, thinking that because they're rewriting their notes over and over, that's actually a really beneficial and productive use of their time. But when you look at the studies on what the best way to study actually is, it's testing yourself. But often students will avoid that difficult process of going to talk to the professor, of doing practice problems, because of this fear of wasting effort, this fear of getting problems wrong. And so what they do is they distract themselves with productive procrastination by writing their notes over and over, or they might go on YouTube and look up videos on how to study and look up videos on how to motivate themselves, thinking that, well, this is self-help, this is personal development, this is helping me. But really what you're doing is you're trying to avoid the very work that you need to do in order to gain momentum, in order to gain progress, and in order to achieve your goals. The fifth way that students self-sabotage without knowing it is setting really high standards, high unattainable standards. And the way that I define unattainable standards, it's not standards that you aren't able to achieve, but more so, it's setting goals, setting standards that don't match where you are physically and emotionally in your life. You're afraid to lower the bar even though you might need to, even though it's probably the best thing for you to do, because your priorities in this moment in your life need to shift and need to change. And the reason why you refuse to lower the bar just for this season in your life is because what you think lowering the bar says about you. You think that if you allow yourself to want the B, because the B right now is super satisfying for you with where you are in your life, with everything you have going on in your life, you think that means that you're not a high achiever, that you're not somebody who is smart or someone who is a go-getter. But you are doing the best thing for yourself by lowering your standards depending on where you are mentally and emotionally in your life. I think that it's super healthy when you actually consider the space that you're in and you create goals from that space to honor yourself and to take care of yourself. But students will often self-sabotage by setting these really high attainable goals, because then they also have an excuse when they don't hit it to say, well, it was a really difficult time in this semester. I got really sick. This and that happened, and that's why I wasn't able to get the A in the class. When all along you probably knew that it wasn't possible based off of everything that you had, but you tricked yourself and you set these really high unattainable standards and you killed yourself and you sabotaged yourself in the process. The sixth way that I often see students holding themselves back, getting in their own way, and really self-sabotaging themselves from achieving their goals is by creating plans and not following through, or not being willing to adjust their plans as needed. So often I hear students say, I don't have enough time, or I can't get myself to stick to my schedule, or what do I do if I go over time? And students get so hung up on this plan that they've created inside of their planner, and they don't allow themselves to have any wiggle room, to have any space to make the necessary changes as things come up in their life. They also don't ever really take the time to actually look on paper, physically sit down and see on paper if the plan that they've created for themselves actually fits into the time that they have. So they have these massive to-do lists, these massive goals for themselves that aren't aligned with what you actually have going on in your life. And what you do is you set yourself up for failure because you're not taking into account your reality. You're creating this idealized version of what your day is going to go like. You're creating these idealized days depending on where, what you think you should be doing, how much you think you should be getting done in a day, and you're not taking into account what is actually going on in your day-to-day and how much energy you actually have each day to carry out with this plan. And so thus you're not able to follow through because you're creating these days that no one can actually do, that no one can actually carry out in their life. And so when things don't go according to plan, you're also refusing and really resisting having to make the necessary tweaks because you're making it mean something about you just because you weren't able to stick to the schedule. But the only reason why we create a plan isn't so that we can follow it to a T. It's more so that we can see and have a framework for if we're going to be on track. Because what I know for sure is that shit is always going to happen. Shit is always going to hit the fan. And nothing ever really goes according to plan, no matter how beautiful your plan goes, no matter how scheduled out your day goes. Things are always going to come up. And if you are inflexible, if you don't know how to make the necessary adjustments, you're going to set yourself up in a space where you're not going to be able to carry out on your plan. And then that's going to add to the identity that you are a procrastinator, that you are someone who can't stick to a schedule, that nothing ever works out for you, which doesn't help your self-esteem, which doesn't help your self-confidence, and doesn't motivate you to want to do the things that you need to do in order to see the kind of success it is that you want. Is this making sense? If it is, in the comments, let me know what's coming up for you. The seventh way that I see college women specifically holding themselves back and really getting in their own way, it's never challenging themselves to grow, staying safe, staying small, doing things that they know that they can do in order to maintain some sense of control, some sense of false power, some sense of false control, to protect their image, to avoid failure. I see so many brilliant college women who are a part of the SheRocks College community, who watch my videos on a consistent basis, really play small, never stepping outside of their comfort zone because they're so afraid of what will happen if someone sees them failing, if someone sees them not at their best, if someone sees them slipping up a little bit. But in you playing small and you wanting to stay in your safe environment, never trying anything new, what you are guaranteeing is that you never change, that your life never gets better because you're never willing to do anything new. And if you keep doing the same things over and over, you're going to keep experiencing the same life that you're experiencing now. And if you are experiencing frustration, dissatisfaction, anger, bitterness, any of those things in your life right now, and you are continuing to do the same thing over and over, never stepping out of your comfort zone, never trying anything new, then you are going to guarantee that frustration. You're going to guarantee that bitterness. You're going to guarantee that dissatisfaction. The only way you start changing your life is by changing what you do and being willing to be bad at it at first, being willing not to be perfect at it, being willing to be in the process of becoming. There is power in not yet. There is power in being in the process of becoming who it is that you want to be. It's the only way that you get from point A to point B. We're not living in a quantum realm where you can jump from one side to the other. You have to go through the steps. There is a period of discomfort. There is a period of messiness. There is a period where you look like a toddler first learning how to walk. And when you never challenge yourself because you never want to go through that process of becoming, you never get to see yourself become whatever it is that you want to become. So you basically sabotage yourself from ever achieving your goals. The 8th way that I see college women getting in their own way is by overcommitting and not setting boundaries. I don't know what it is, but college women take on way more than they need to, way more than they have to. And I think it's because we feel like we have something to prove. I think it's because we like it when people tell us, wow, you're amazing for handling all of that. Because we like it when people identify us as the person who can succeed even though we have a very busy lifestyle. It's because we like it when people put us on a pedestal because of everything we have on our plate, even though we're struggling, even though we're filled with anxiety, even though we are stress eating and crying all the time because we cannot handle it all. But we put a lot on our plate often. We put a lot on our plate in order to avoid focusing on what it is that we actually need to focus on to become better. Because if we're busy, we can use that as an excuse for why we're not working out. Because if we're busy, we can use that as an excuse for why we're not an A student. Because if we're busy, we can use that as an excuse as to why our marriage failed. Because if we're busy, we can use that as an excuse to why we don't have any friends. Because if we're busy, we can use that as an excuse for insert whatever it is that you feel like you don't have enough time for. We don't set boundaries with ourselves. We don't set boundaries with other people. We overcommit just so that we can have the identity of somebody who is busy, so that we can avoid doing the actual work that changes who we are and changes our lives. The 9th way that I see college women self-sabotaging is through not setting goals, but really it's about not making decisions. Because we don't trust ourselves. Because we have no certainty in ourselves. Often people say, I don't set goals because I never achieve them. Well, you never achieve them because you never decide to. You never make any decisions about what you're going to have, be, and do in your life. And when you're not making any decisions, what you're doing is constantly oscillating, wasting energy, because to oscillate means to move back and forth. And in order to move back and forth, that requires an energy expenditure. So when you don't decide what you want to do, when you don't decide what you want to have, when you don't decide what you want to be, you never get there. Because what it's like is you driving to the grocery store, right? Seeing a red light and turning back around, and then going back, seeing a red light and turning back around. You never get to the grocery store because you're constantly going back and forth. You're never making a decision on whether or not you're going to get to the grocery store or not. And that's what happens when you don't set goals. Really, not setting goals is not making a decision. And you not making a decision is basically saying, I don't want to become who I say I want to become. I don't really want what I keep telling everybody that I want. Because without that goal, without that endpoint, you don't get the directions. If you don't put your end destination in the GPS on your smartphone, you're not going to get the directions on how to get there. You're not going to get the steps on how to get there. And so by us not setting goals, we're sabotaging ourselves because we're never giving ourselves the space to actually think through how we're going to get there. And we avoid setting goals because we have this fear of, what if I don't hit it? What are people going to think? What does that say about me? And again, it brings up these feelings of self-pity. Then we're just sitting there thinking, why is nothing ever working out for me? Well, because you're never deciding. You're never choosing yourself. You're never sitting in your own certainty, your own ability that you can freaking do it. The 10th way that I see women holding themselves back, self-sabotaging, getting in their own way, is waiting to have all of the details before they start. Waiting for the circumstances to be perfect. Waiting for a very specific moment. Waiting until Monday to start the study plan. Waiting until the beginning of the month to set a new goal. Here's a news flash. There's never going to be a perfect time. The reason why you are waiting is because you want to delay the possibility that you might fail for as long as possible. The reason why you are not starting right away is because you want to delay the discomfort of having to learn a new skill for as long as possible. The reason why you're waiting for the perfect circumstances is because it gives you an excuse to not have to do the hard work, to not have to go through the emotional growth that it's going to require of you to achieve what it is that you want to achieve. And so you rather just keep pushing off the date, waiting for the perfect circumstances so that you have an excuse to not become who you were called to freaking be. You see, we like to pretend that there are limitations. We like to pretend that the world is against us, but our biggest enemy is ourselves. Our biggest barrier is ourselves. Most of the time, no one is telling us that we can't do something. Most of the time, no one is telling us that we don't have the ability to do something. Most of the time, it's us. We're saying it to ourselves. We are putting the power outside of ourselves. The 11th way that you get in your own way without even knowing it is being addicted to achievement, being addicted to being productive because of the status that you believe it gives you. And this one right here is one that I was so guilty of. Constantly chasing achievement after achievement, status after status, because I wanted to be better than everyone else because of how it made me feel. And it also allowed me to stay busy so I didn't have to deal with the emotional turmoil that was happening in my family, that was happening in my relationship, that was happening in my relationship to myself. Because the more I set higher goals, the more I could focus on that. I didn't have to focus on how much I hated myself. Because the more I focused on achieving the next thing, the less time I had to dedicate to my relationship that was failing. The more time I spent on achieving this goal, the less time I had to think about what was happening with my family. And those things are the things that bring true fulfillment. All of the achievements brought false fulfillment because once they were gone, once I hit them, I still felt numb. I still felt unfulfilled. But we like to trick ourselves into thinking that we're doing ourselves a service by appearing successful out in the world, even though internally we feel like our lives have no meaning, or that our lives aren't joyous enough, or we're not feeling anything at all. We're avoiding having to really process and be present with ourselves and be self-aware. The 12th way, and this is the final way that you might be unknowingly getting in your own way, is by holding on to your past failures, your past identity, and being unwilling to morph, change, and adapt your identity to become. Some of you want to keep holding on to the idea that you failed chemistry once before. Most of you want to keep holding on to the idea that you're not good at math. Most of you want to keep holding on to the identity of being a procrastinator. Most of you want to keep holding on to insert whatever identity you've latched yourself onto. And the more you continue to grasp onto that identity that is holding you back because it is not serving the highest version of you, the more you're going to keep repeating similar thought patterns, similar emotional patterns, similar behaviors that create the same day-to-day life experiences. I said this in my last video. If you want to experience college in a different way, you literally have to become a different person. Because underneath all of this, underneath self-sabotage, underneath this perfectionist identity, underneath the fixed mindset, underneath what we call getting in our own way, is the underlying themes of self-judgment and not being enough. The reason why we continue to have the all or nothing mindset, we continue to want to people please, we continue to want to hold on to someone's love, that we continue to procrastinate, that we continue to set unattainable standards, that we continue to not follow through on our plans, the reason why we continue to never challenge ourselves, the reason why we continue to overcommit, the reason why we continue to not set goals, the reason why we continue to wait until everything is perfect, the reason why we continue to be addicted to achievement, the reason why we continue to hold on to our past is because we fear that we are not enough. Because we fear that we don't belong, because we fear that we are not worthy. You do all of those things because you are afraid of meeting your shadow self. You see, judgment is just an opinion, and opinions are just strong thoughts and strong emotions that aren't even based on facts. Most of us judge a person in 7 seconds of meeting them. We think we automatically know how they think, who they are, how much money they make, and all of that happens in 7 seconds without us even being conscious of it. We have all of these judgments, these opinions. Opinions are just thoughts. They're just feelings that we have about a certain thing that aren't even based on facts. They're based on conditioning. They're based off beliefs. They're based off of rules that we've picked up along the way that we never even chose. And I like to give this example of how conditions, beliefs, and rules come into our society and how it shapes the way that we behave in the world. And when we came in, like when we were babies, our brain was basically blank. We came in with certain instincts, the instincts to like grab so we don't fall off, to eat, to blink, to breathe. Like we have these reflexes that we came into the world with, but for the most part, our brain was a blank slate. It's like a blank CD. And the only way that we got stuff put into our brain or onto this CD was through our parents. So whatever our parents told us is what we believed. Whatever our teacher told us is what we believed. Whatever we saw on the TV is what we believed, because we didn't come in with software already. The software had to be inputted, and we didn't have a choice on which software we got to plant into our brain. Someone else decided that. And we've just been going through life with whatever software someone else put in us, with whatever beliefs that person has about the world, with whatever judgment that person has about the world, with whatever that person wanted to teach us. And we've never taken the time to question it. And so we are busy going through the world, making decisions about who we think we are, who we need to be, based off of someone else's junk, someone else's software. And a lot of the reasons why we are unhappy, why we feel like we have no autonomy, why we feel so unfulfilled is because we've never questioned these beliefs, because we've never questioned these conditions, because we've never questioned who we really want to be, what we really believe. And you will always feel inadequate when you judge yourself from these states, from these conditions, these beliefs that have been placed on you by your parents and by society. And you're always going to rationalize them as true. You're always going to project. You're always going to wear this social mask because at the bottom of it all, you are afraid of not being enough. And you have judgments about what is good or bad, what is right or wrong. You have judgments about who deserves love and who doesn't. You have judgments about who deserves success and who doesn't. And with that being said, because that was a lot, I want to start switching over to how we start getting out of our own way. Because I just went through and I brought to awareness all of the ways that you are getting in your own way and self-sabotaging yourself. But it's not enough just to be aware of it. It's not enough just for me to basically tell you all the ways that you're doing life wrong, because I don't think that that's what's the case. But I think that I also need to give you something to work through. And so that's what I'm going to move into now. So the very first thing that we need to do is we actually need to identify what we're afraid of. Because like I said, at the bottom of this is this feeling that we are not enough, that we are going to be judged, and most often that we're judging ourselves as good or bad, worthy or not worthy, smart or not smart. And we are using all of these self-sabotaging behaviors in order to protect an identity that we believe is more likable, an identity that we believe is more worthy, an identity that we believe is acceptable by society. And it isn't until we start to identify what it is that we're afraid to lose that we can actually be free. So step number 1 is to journal around this question. And that question is, identify everything that you're afraid to be. These are called shadow qualities. So shadow qualities are any qualities that you have rejected because you believe that they aren't worthy, that they're bad, that you have judgments about them. So if you want to learn more about shadows and the shadow self, you can look up the psychologist Carl Jung. He's really the pioneer behind the shadow work. But shadow work is all about this idea that we can't really become whole until we accept all parts of ourselves. Because again, we are yin and yang. It's all about balance. We are feminine and masculine. There are great qualities about us and qualities that might be perceived as bad, but we all have two sides, happiness, sadness. All of that exists as one, but the moment that we reject certain parts of ourselves, what we do is we literally rip ourselves apart from being whole. And it isn't until we start to see and really play with our shadow sides that we can really start to feel whole, that we can start to feel brilliant, that we can start to feel like we understand what it is that we want and who we authentically are. And so we start by identifying everything that you're afraid to be. So these are your shadow qualities. So for me, I was afraid to be seen as a dumb Latina girl. I was afraid to be seen as a bad housewife. I was afraid to be seen as sexual. I was afraid to be seen as smart and successful, but not good looking. I was afraid to be seen as bossy and bitchy. I had all these parts of myself that I was afraid to really own, right? Because each and every single one of those shadow qualities also have a lot of light to them, right? The next question that you want to journal around is, what am I afraid people will find out about me? This question is really powerful because when you answer it, what it's going to require of you is to be really honest with yourself and to really sit with yourself, because whatever you're afraid people will find out about you is the reason why you do a lot of the things that you do. And you would be a really different person if you weren't afraid of those things. You'd really get to meet yourself for real if you weren't afraid. There's a part of us who, so we think of ourselves in a certain way, and then there's who we actually are. These questions that are coming next help us to see that. The next question that I want you to journal around is, who do you think you need to be in order to be worthy? In these two questions, you're really going to see the duality. You're going to really see the dissonance that exists within you, because there's this part of you who you think you need to be. And then there's this part of you who you actually are. The question of, what am I afraid people will find out about me, is probably who you actually are, who you wish you could be all the time, because that's you at your most vulnerable. It's you at your most authentic. It's you being real. And then there's this part of you of who you think you need to be, which is really a facade. It's a mask that you wear to society so that you'll be more likable, so that you'll be more lovable, so that you'll be perceived as more successful and desirable and magnetic. But there's nothing more magnetic than just being authentically yourself. The last set of questions is going to reveal to you the behaviors that you have to protect yourself from having people see you in a way that you're afraid for them to see you, and the facade that you play. So how do you avoid people seeing that side of you? How do you avoid people seeing you as not smart? What do you do? And you might do some of these 12 things that I went through in terms of self-sabotaging behaviors. The next question is, how do you avoid you seeing that side of you? How do you avoid you seeing that side of you? Because there is nobody that judges us more than ourselves. There is nobody that takes away our ability to be whoever it is that we want to be than ourselves. So how do you avoid seeing yourself? And then the last question is, how do you play the role of the person you think you need to be in order to be worthy? How do you play the role of the person you think you need to be in order to be worthy? Journaling is a very simple and practical exercise that everybody can do. It's not easy though. And when I say it's not easy, it's not because you need fancy equipment. It's not because you need a special notebook. It's not because you need to have some certain level of intelligence. The reason why it's hard is because everything that it's going to bring up for you, it's what you've been avoiding through the self-sabotaging behaviors. And once you see it, it's really hard to ignore. And you've been trying to ignore it. You've been trying for a really long time to avoid dealing with it. But your entire power, your entire next level, all the momentum that you're desiring, all the satisfaction that you're desiring, all of the joy that you're desiring, all of the ways that you're dying to see yourself reach your highest potential is in what comes out of these journaling prompts. And I know that this is going to be hard. And for that reason, I'm actually going to invite you to join the Secret Study Society. It is a free Facebook group where you can come and get coaching around the answers to these questions, where you can be surrounded by a group of over 100 women, not 100 women, almost 1,000 women, a group of almost 1,000 women who are going to be doing this work over the course of this month. We are changing up the way that we do these SheRocks College live videos because I don't just want you to be inspired by what it is that I'm saying. I actually want to see you have a transformation. I want you to take what I share in these videos and apply it to your life and see how your life changes for the better. And in order for that to happen, I want to create a space where you have the support of other women who are willing to do this kind of work on themselves, to see themselves grow, to get out of their own way, to stop self-sabotaging, to allow themselves to really step in and own their brilliance. And so I'm going to just bring up the link to the Secret Study Society. I'm going to drop it in the comments for you. And it's also going to be in the description of this video if you're watching this later on. But I highly, highly, highly recommend that you join the Secret Study Society because, again, in the month of May, I'm going to be coaching women just like you who are doing this work through these journaling prompts. Next week, I'm actually releasing a worksheet that walks you through these questions and has additional questions on top of that you can go through. So let me go ahead and drop this in the comments here so that you have it. So that's happening next week. And then on the third week of the month, so actually on May 22nd of 2019, I'm going to be doing this free coaching call where we hop on a video call just like this, but I also get to hear you and see you if you decide to be on camera. And we're just going to talk about these questions and I'm going to coach you through them and I'm going to help you to see where you're getting in your own way and provide insight to the blind spots that you might have around how you're self-sabotaging and really help you to see things in a different light and help give you tools and resources to walk through the discomfort and come out on the other side being so proud of yourself, being so proud of who you've become because you've done this work. And so all of that is going to be exclusive to the SheRocks College study community because of the fact that YouTube doesn't really have the type of community in order to be able to hold these types of conversations in a way that feels really sacred and intimate and special. And so that's the reason why this group exists. And that's where I'm going to be sharing everything because it's a safe space for us to really share, this type of work that we're doing with ourselves. And that's going to conclude tonight's video. If you are someone who struggles with procrastination, I don't want to forget to let you know that I do have an anti-procrastination guide. It was specifically created for college women like you who are brilliant and tired of seeing themselves fail, and they can't really figure out why they are constantly procrastinating. So this guide walks you through why it's happening, and it also walks you through how to start getting yourself to take the necessary action that you need to take as a college student. So The link to download this anti-procrastination guide is in the description of this video. You can go there now and download it. You just need to enter in your name and your email address. I really hope that this video was helpful. Thank you so much, Danielle, Isaiah, and Marieli, for joining us live. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your month. Bye.